I live in a quiet place called Wind Whispering Town, where it is spring-like all year round and the sun always shines softly on every inch of land, as if it has cast a golden veil over the whole town. The people in the town lead a simple but comfortable life, rising with the sun and resting with the sunset. They get along with each other in harmony and help each other. I have a beautiful wife named Elena. Her presence is like the brightest star in the town, attracting the attention of everyone. Elena has long, black hair that is as beautiful as ink. It seems to have a life of its own, gently swaying in the breeze like black silk, shimmering with an enchanting radiance. Whenever she walks through the crowd, her long hair becomes the focus of everyone's attention. Many young girls are envious and try to imitate her hairstyle, but they can never achieve the same charm. Her eyes are as deep as a bottomless pool, a deep blue that seems to hold endless secrets and emotions. When she stares at you quietly, you feel as if you are about to be swallowed by that blue pool and involuntarily fall into it. There is always a gentle light shining in her eyes, which makes people feel incredibly warm and at ease. And her figure is impeccable. Her waist is so slender that it seems like it could snap if you touch it lightly, yet it has just the right amount of suppleness. Her posture is elegant, and every movement she makes exudes a sense of nobility. Whether she is selecting items at the town market or praying piously in the church, every one of her actions seems like a carefully choreographed dance, full of rhythm and beauty. Our life is as peaceful and beautiful as the time in this small town. Every morning, I wake up when the first ray of sunshine shines through the window. Looking at Elena's peaceful sleeping face by my side, I feel full of happiness and contentment. I get up quietly, prepare a simple but warm breakfast for her, and then wait quietly for her to wake up. When Irina wakes up, she always gives me a sweet smile, like a spring flower blooming with endless fragrance. We will sit together at the table, enjoying breakfast while talking about the plans for the day. Sometimes we will go to the fields together, feeling the fragrance of the soil and the growth of the crops. Sometimes we will stroll through the streets of the town, greeting our neighbors cordially and sharing the trivialities of each other's lives. However, recently I have noticed something strange about Elena. She has become mysterious, often going out suddenly without warning, and every time she returns, she looks very panicked. There is also a new look of worry and unease in her eyes that I have never seen before. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that she just had her own little secret, or maybe she wanted to surprise me. I comforted myself, saying that couples need some personal space, and that I should respect her choice. So, I just asked her gently where she had been and what she had done every time she came back from going out. But she was always vague and gave some excuses to get away with it. Once, when she returned from one of her outings, I noticed some strange stains on her clothes, the color and texture of which were completely different from anything we normally came into contact with. I couldn't help but ask her again, but she looked a little impatient and hurried into the room to change her clothes. I stood there, my suspicions growing. As time passed, Elena went out more and more frequently, and each time she went out, she stayed out longer and longer. She no longer shared her life with me as she used to, and our communication became less and less. Sometimes, I watched her sitting there, her eyes staring blankly into the distance, and my heart filled with worry and confusion. I began to pay attention to her every move, trying to find out the reason for her mysterious outings. I discovered that every time she went out, she would deliberately take some relatively remote paths to avoid the crowds in town. Moreover, she always went out at dusk and didn't come back until late at night. Her behavior made me feel more and more that something was wrong. Finally, one day I decided to follow her to see what she was really up to. As night fell, Elena left the house quietly as usual. I followed her from a distance, both nervous and curious. I kept a careful distance, afraid that she might notice me. She walked along the edge of town, towards the forest. The forest was a place of mystery and danger to us, where unknown creatures and forces were said to lurk. Usually, few of us would venture into the depths of the forest without good reason. Watching Elena walk unhesitatingly into the forest, an ominous feeling welled up in my heart. I followed closely behind her, through the dense woods, the fallen leaves rustling under my feet. The air in the forest was damp and decaying, making it feel a little oppressive. The moonlight shone through the gaps in the leaves, casting dappled shadows and adding a touch of eeriness to the whole forest. Irina walked deeper and deeper into the forest, her steps firm but hurried, as if she were searching for something. I never dared to make too much noise and could only cautiously follow behind her. Suddenly, she stopped, and I quickly hid behind a tree, holding my breath and my heart beating faster and faster. I looked at her, my heart filled with doubt. What was she doing? Why had she come to this dangerous place? Just as I pondered these questions, I noticed that Elena's body began to exude a strange aura. It was completely different from the gentleness and elegance she usually exuded, but was full of darkness and evil. I widened my eyes, unable to believe my own eyes. Elena's eyes also became unfamiliar. The gentle gaze was now full of greed and madness. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, revealing a strange smile that made me feel creepy. I hid behind a tree, my heart beating like a drum, afraid to make a sound. I didn't know if the woman in front of me was still my wife. I only knew that a storm was quietly approaching, and it seemed that I could no longer escape. I clenched my fists and secretly vowed in my heart that I must find out the truth of all this, no matter what awaited me ahead. I hid behind a tree, my heart pounding so loudly it seemed to jump out of my throat. The sound of my pounding heart was especially loud in the quiet forest. I stared at Elena, who looked both familiar and strange to me. The strange aura emanating from her was like an invisible black mist, surrounding her and constantly surging and eroding the fresh air around her, making the already somewhat oppressive atmosphere of the forest even more eerie. Elena stood quietly, the moonlight filtering through the gaps in the branches and leaves and casting dappled shadows on her. Her figure, interwoven in the shadows, appeared illusory and ethereal, as if she would disappear at any moment into the dark forest. She tilted her head slightly, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath, the movement as if she were greedily absorbing some mysterious power. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes. The deep, gentle blue eyes were now shining with a mysterious green light, like two strange flames leaping and burning in the darkness. Her eyes revealed a crazy longing, as if she were pursuing something unattainable but incredibly tempting. I couldn't help but shudder. Fear and doubt flooded my mind. What had happened to my beloved wife? Irina began to slowly pace through the forest. Her footsteps were light and strange, as if she were dancing, but there was an indescribable evil charm in her dance. Her long hair danced in the wind, like black vipers writhing in the night. With each step she took, the fallen leaves beneath her feet made a rustling sound, as if accompanying her dance, and the sound made my heart tighten. I followed her carefully, trying not to make any noise. I dared not take my eyes off her for a moment, for fear that she would suddenly disappear from my sight. The trees in the forest were tall and dense, with branches intertwined like a huge net, enveloping us. Occasionally, a few night birds were startled by our movements and let out shrill cries, piercing the silent night sky and sending my nerves to the extreme. Elena seemed to be completely oblivious to her surroundings, her attention focused entirely on her goal. She walked deeper and deeper into the forest, getting faster and faster, and I had to quicken my pace to avoid losing her. As we continued deeper into the forest, the surroundings became increasingly eerie, and a strong putrid smell filled the air, as if something was rotting in the darkness. Suddenly, Elena stopped. She was standing in an open meadow surrounded by some ancient, twisted trees. The trunks of these trees were covered in moss and vines, and their shapes were grotesque, some looking like fanged monsters and some like twisted skeletons, which was chilling to look at. Elena stood in the middle of the meadow, slightly raising her head and looking up at the sky. I hid behind a tree and watched her every move in silence. She muttered something under her breath, her voice low and indistinct, as if she were reciting some ancient incantation. As she chanted, the air around her grew strangely cold, and I couldn't help but shiver, goosebumps rising on my body. Suddenly, a black light burst out from Irina's body. The light was as dazzling as lightning and illuminated the entire meadow. I was unable to open my eyes due to the sudden glare, and I was filled with fear. When I opened my eyes again, I saw a black mist surrounding Irina's body, which kept spinning and making a hissing sound. Elena's face wore a satisfied smile, one that looked particularly hideous in the darkness. Her body began to tremble slightly, as if she were bearing some kind of tremendous force. I looked at her, my heart filled with worry and fear. I didn't know what she was doing it for, or whether she would ever return to her old self. Just then, Elena suddenly turned her head and looked in the direction where I was hiding. My heart tightened, and I thought I had been discovered. My body subconsciously wanted to hide, but her eyes were not focused on me, but seemed to be looking somewhere behind me. I followed her gaze and saw, not far behind me, under a large tree, an object that glowed faintly. The light was dark red, like burning coals, and it stood out in the darkness. Elena's eyes flashed with greed, and without hesitation she walked towards the object. I was filled with curiosity, wondering what the object was. But I dared not reveal myself, so I continued to follow her quietly. When Elena walked up to the object, she crouched down, reached out and gently touched it. I saw her hand tremble slightly the moment it touched the object, and a complex expression appeared on her face, a mixture of surprise and a hint of fear. Elena took the object in her hands and stood up. I could then see clearly that it was a black crystal ball, the surface of which was shimmering with a dark red light, as if it were pulsating with life. Elena held the crystal ball tightly against her chest, a look of triumph in her eyes. Just then, a low growl suddenly came from the forest, shaking the ground like a muffled thunder. Elena's face instantly turned pale, her body trembling slightly, her eyes filled with fear. She clutched the crystal ball in her hand tightly and turned towards the exit of the forest, running. I was startled by the sudden roar, but I didn't care about that and hurriedly followed Eliana. We ran desperately through the forest, the surrounding trees and vines quickly passing behind us. The roar got closer and closer, as if a huge monster was closing in on us. Eliana's speed increased, her long hair flying in the wind like a black banner. I followed her closely behind with only one thought in mind. I had to protect her no matter what awaited us. Finally, we ran out of the forest and back to the edge of town. Ileana stopped and gasped for breath. There was still a hint of fear in her eyes, but more of a feeling of relief. She looked at the crystal ball in her hands, then at me, opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but ultimately did not. I looked at her, my heart filled with questions and concerns. I wanted to ask her what was going on, but seeing her tired and frightened appearance, I didn't have the heart to pursue it further. We returned home in silence, and Elena went straight into her room and locked herself in. I stood at the door of the room, my heart filled with mixed emotions, not knowing where our lives would go, or when Elena's secrets would be revealed. After returning home, Elena locked herself in her room and didn't make a sound the whole night. I stood outside her door for a long time, filled with worry and doubt, with countless thoughts racing through my mind. The mysterious black crystal ball, the strange aura emanating from Elena, and the chilling roar in the forest all left me feeling extremely confused and frightened. The next morning, the sun shone through the window, but I felt no warmth. I sat in the living room chair, keeping my eyes on Irina's door, hoping she would come out and give me an explanation. Finally, the door slowly opened, and Irina walked out. Her face was pale as paper, and there was still a trace of fear in her eyes, but more of a kind of determination and firmness. "Are you okay?" I asked carefully, my voice trembling a little. Elena looked at me, didn't say anything, and just nodded slightly. There seemed to be something flashing in her eyes, but I couldn't read it. She walked over to the dining table, sat down, and started eating breakfast, but her movements seemed a bit mechanical, as if she was just completing a task. I watched her, my heart full of questions, but I knew this was not the time to pursue them. I silently accompanied her through breakfast, and then watched as she packed up and got ready to leave. "Where are you going?" Couldn't help but ask. Elena paused for a moment, then said, "I'm going out for a bit. Don't worry." With that, she hurriedly walked out of the house. I watched her leave, and my unease grew stronger. I decided to follow her again to see what she was really up to. I quietly followed behind her, keeping a certain distance. Elena still walked towards the forest. Her footsteps hurried, as if she was in a hurry. When we entered the forest again, the atmosphere was even more eerie than yesterday. The trees seemed to be whispering and crying, and the wind whistled in my ears, as if countless ghosts were wailing. Elena's pace did not waver for a moment, and she walked straight into the depths of the forest. After walking for a while, Irina arrived at a more open area. The ground here was covered with strange symbols, which gave off a faint blue light as if they had some kind of mysterious power. Irina stood in the middle of the symbols and raised the black crystal ball in her hands. Suddenly, the air around her began to fluctuate violently, and a powerful evil force surged from all directions. I hid behind a tree not far away, covering my mouth tightly for fear of making a sound. I could feel the power of that force, which made my body tremble involuntarily. As the power gathered, a figure gradually appeared in front of Elena. It was a man exuding an aura of evil. He was tall, more than a head taller than Elena. His face was cold, and his skin was a grayish white, as if there was not a trace of blood in him. His eyes were red, like burning flames, full of charm and evil. His hair was black, but it kept writhing like a snake, giving a creepy feeling. Elena actually let out a flattering smile at the sight of the man, a smile that was completely different from her usual gentle one. Her posture also unconsciously moved closer to the man, her eyes full of admiration and longing. "Master, I got the crystal ball as you commanded." Elena's voice trembled a little, but it was more of an excitement. The man nodded, his voice low and hoarse. "Very good, Elena, you have done well. As long as you continue to serve me, I will make you possess powerful dark magic and become the most powerful being in the world." Hearing the man's words, a greedy light flashed in Elena's eyes. She hurriedly said, "Master, I am willing to do anything for you, as long as you can give me power." I hid behind a tree and heard their conversation, and my heart felt like it had been struck by lightning. It turned out that Elena had contacted this evil spirit wizard in order to obtain dark magic power. I watched them intimately, my heart filled with anger and pain. My beloved wife had betrayed our feelings and colluded with this evil wizard for power. The evil sorcerer reached out and gently stroked Elena's hair. His hand felt like the skin of a cold snake, causing Elena's body to tremble slightly. But she did not resist in the slightest, but instead appeared even more submissive. "From now on, you must keep this crystal ball safe. It is the key to opening the door to dark magic," said the evil sorcerer. Elena hurriedly nodded and hugged the crystal ball even tighter. Just then, the evil spirit wizard suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction where I was hiding. A hint of cold murderous intent shone in his eyes, and my heart tightened, knowing that I might have been discovered. "Come out, whoever is hiding there." The evil spirit sorcerer's voice pierced my ears like an ice pick. I hesitated for a moment, but knew that I could no longer hide. I slowly walked out from behind the tree and stood in front of them. Elena saw me and her face showed a trace of surprise and panic, but it was quickly replaced by a kind of indifference. "Who are you? Why are you following us?" The evil spirit sorcerer's voice was full of threats. I looked at Elena, my heart filled with disappointment and pain, and then looked at the evil spirit wizard and said, "I am Elena's husband. I just want to know what she is doing." The evil spirit wizard laughed out loud after hearing my words, his laughter like the screech of an owl, creepy. "So it turns out to be her husband. Well, unfortunately, you are too late. Elena has chosen me, chosen the dark magic." I looked at Elena and shouted, "Elena, how could you? We used to love each other so much. Have you forgotten?" A flash of struggle crossed Elena's eyes, but it quickly hardened. "Don't mention the past. I only want power now. Only with power can I protect myself and the people I want to protect." I listened to her words, and a sharp pain shot through my heart. I knew that Yelena had now been overwhelmed by the dark magic, and she was no longer the gentle and kind wife I had known. The evil spirit wizard looked at us and impatiently said, Since you have seen it all, you cannot be allowed to live." With that, he raised his hand and a black ray of light shot towards me. I was shocked and quickly moved to one side to avoid it. The black light flew past me, hitting a nearby tree and instantly shattering it to pieces. I knew I was in great danger, but I couldn't just give up. I had to wake up Elena and get her out of this evil place. I stood face to face with the evil sorcerer, my heart filled with fear and anger, but more than anything, a firm belief. I knew that this battle would be incredibly difficult, but I had to do my best for Ileana and for our once love. Ileana stood by my side, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. I wondered if she would make the right choice at the critical moment, or whether she would completely succumb to the temptation of dark magic. I stood face to face with the evil sorcerer. The evil aura emanating from him bound me like a tangible shackle, making every breath incredibly difficult. Elena stood by my side. Her figure looked so strange in this gloomy forest. I desperately looked for the tenderness and love I once felt in her eyes, but all I saw was the coldness and determination blinded by dark magic. The evil spirit wizard saw that I had avoided his attack, and a flash of displeasure appeared in his eyes. His hair, which moved like a snake's, twisted even more violently with his mood. "Humph, quite agile. But that won't change your fate of dying today." His voice was low and hoarse, as if it were coming from the depths of hell, with a chilling murderous intent. I held back the fear in my heart and said aloud, "Ileana, are you really going to just stand there and watch him kill me? We've been through so much together. Aren't those memories worth anything?" My voice trembled with a hint of sadness, a reluctance to let go of our past relationship, and a reluctance to accept the cruel reality in front of me. Irina's body trembled slightly, and there seemed to be a trace of struggle in her eyes, but soon, the greedy desire took over again. She bit her lip, turned her head away, and stopped looking at me. "I've said it before, don't mention the past. My only goal now is to gain great power. Don't get in my way, or you will become my enemy too." Her voice was cold, but I could still hear a trace of hesitation hidden within. The evil spirit wizard sneered. "Since she has said so, you should stop wasting your efforts. Today you have seen what you shouldn't have seen, and you must die." With that, he quickly waved his hands in the air, mumbling words as the surrounding air began to distort. Countless black mists rose from the ground and surrounded us tightly. My heart tightened, knowing that he was about to attack again. Just then, I suddenly remembered some legends I had heard in the forest before. It was said that a mysterious power was hidden in this forest, and only someone with a pure heart could awaken it. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself down, recalling the good times I had with Elena, and trying to find a trace of strength from those warm memories. The attack of the evil sorcerer came instantly, a black wave of energy surging towards me. I concentrated all my spirit, and at that critical moment, I dodged to the side, while silently praying in my heart that the mysterious power would appear. However, that power did not appear as I wished, and I was unable to avoid it. I was brushed by the energy wave, and a sharp pain came, immediately leaving a deep wound on my arm, from which blood gushed out. "Haha, is that all you've got? You're so unworthy." The evil spirit laughed triumphantly, his laughter echoing through the dark forest and sounding particularly harsh. I gritted my teeth, endured the pain, and looked at Elena, my eyes full of pleading. "Elena, do you really want to see me die? Have you forgotten our vow? No matter what difficulties we encounter, we must support each other and never abandon each other." Elena's body trembled slightly. She slowly turned her head and looked at me, and the coldness in her eyes finally loosened a little. I don't want this either, but only with great power can I protect us. The world is so dangerous now, without power we can't do anything." Her voice was tinged with a hint of choking, as if she was trying hard to find excuses for her actions. I seized the opportunity and hurriedly said, "Ileana, we don't need that kind of evil power. We can face difficulties together just like before. As long as we are together, we can overcome whatever we encounter. You have been deceived by him. This kind of dark magic will only make you lose yourself and become more and more cruel. The evil spirit sorcerer was furious when he saw that I was undermining Elena's resolve. "Shut up, you damned guy, how dare you blather here? Elena, don't be fooled by his sweet talk. Only I can give you the power you want. And as soon as you kill him, I will immediately impart to you even more powerful dark magic." A struggle flashed in Elena's eyes as she looked at me and then at the evil spirit wizard, her hands clutching the black crystal ball. "Master, Her voice trembled as if she was making a difficult decision. Just then, I suddenly remembered something that Ileana had once told me. When she was a child, she had been hurt by an evil force, and ever since then, she had longed to have enough power to protect herself and those around her. A thought occurred to me, and I said aloud, "Ileana, have you forgotten? We once said that we would face our fears together, not be driven by them. The power you seek will only plunge you into even deeper fear and suffering." Elena's body shook violently, and a flash of clarity appeared in her eyes, as if she had been touched somewhere deep inside by my words. She looked at the crystal ball in her hands and then at me. The greed and desire in her eyes gradually faded, replaced by a trace of remorse and pain. "Master, I can't go wrong anymore. I don't want to lose him and everything we once had for the sake of power," Elena suddenly said, her voice trembling a little but full of determination. The evil spirit wizard's face instantly turned pale, and he shouted angrily, "You stupid woman, how dare you betray me? If that's the case, you all have to die." With that, he waved his hands, and the surrounding black mist quickly condensed into a huge black scythe, which slashed down at us fiercely. I was shocked and quickly rushed over to protect Elena behind me. The huge scythe was whistling with the wind and was about to cut us down. At this moment of life and death, Elena suddenly raised the black crystal ball in her hand and muttered something. A strong light burst out of the crystal ball, colliding with the power of the black scythe and producing a violent explosion. The forest shook, the trees fell, and a huge shockwave sent us flying. I held Elena close to me, trying to protect her in the chaos. When everything finally calmed down, I realized that the evil spirit sorcerer had disappeared, while Elena was weakly leaning against my chest. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have let my strength get the better of me, and I almost lost you." Elena's voice was weak and full of remorse. I looked at her, and the anger and pain in my heart gradually dissipated, leaving only my heartache for her. "It's okay as long as you're okay. Let's go home together and forget about it," I said softly, holding her hand tightly. However, we both knew that the battle against the evil sorcerer was not truly over. The mysterious dark magic was still surging in the shadows, and our future was full of unknowns and challenges. But at least we were back together again, and no matter what awaited us ahead, we would face it together. I held Elena's hand tightly, feeling the warmth from her palm, and secretly rejoiced that we had temporarily escaped the evil sorcerer's fatal blow. However, the strong dark aura that filled the forest had not dissipated. The surrounding trees had been completely destroyed in the explosion, and the scattered branches and leaves seemed to be telling the story of the fierce battle. Elena leaned into my arms, her body trembling slightly. Her face was pale as paper, and her lips were devoid of blood. Can we really get rid of him?" Her voice carried a hint of fear and uncertainty, and her eyes revealed her worry about the evil spirit sorcerer's reappearance. I stroked her hair gently, trying to offer her comfort. "Don't worry, I'm here. No matter how powerful he is, we will find a way to defeat him." Although I was also filled with anxiety, I knew that at this moment I had to be strong and give Elena confidence. Just then, a low growl came from the depths of the forest, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of hell, with endless anger and resentment. The ground began to tremble slightly, and the air around me grew colder. I knew that the evil sorcerer had not really left, and that he was preparing to launch a new attack. "He's coming?" I whispered, clenching my fists and bracing myself for battle. Elena also straightened up, a determined look in her eyes. She held the black crystal ball tightly in her hands, as if it were our only hope. The figure of the evil spirit wizard gradually appeared from the darkness. His hair was dancing wildly, as if countless black vipers were hissing. His eyes burned with red flames, and his face was full of anger and ferocity. "You damned couple, how dare you betray me? Today, I must make you pay a painful price." His voice echoed through the forest like a thunderclap, shaking people's eardrums. After saying this, the evil spirit sorcerer waved his hands, and countless black spikes rose from the ground and stabbed at us rapidly. I quickly pulled Elena to the side to avoid them, and the spikes grazed our bodies as they flew past, leaving deep marks in the ground. I felt Elena's body tremble, and my heart ached, but I knew we couldn't back down. "Elena, focus, use the power of the crystal ball," I shouted. Elena nodded, closed her eyes, and muttered something, trying to summon the power in the crystal ball. However, the evil spirit wizard seemed to sense our intentions, and he quickly recited a spell. A powerful dark force surged towards Elena, trying to stop her. Elena's body shook a few times under the impact of that force. She gritted her teeth and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. I can't hold on much longer," she said weakly. My heart tightened, and I hurriedly stepped in front of her to buy her some time. Seeing this, the evil spirit wizard sneered. "Just you? You want to stop me? It's like a mantis trying to stop a cart." As he spoke, he folded his hands together and muttered some words, and a huge black energy ball quickly condensed in his hands. The energy ball radiated a heart-rending light, as if containing the power to destroy everything. I knew that if we were hit by this attack, we would definitely die. I looked around, trying to find a place to hide, but most of the surrounding trees had already fallen, and there was simply nowhere to hide. Just then, I suddenly remembered a cave I had seen in the forest before. Perhaps I could temporarily hide there from the evil sorcerer's attack. "Elena, follow me." I took her hand and ran as fast as I could towards the cave. The evil sorcerer saw us running away and burst out laughing maniacally. "Do you think you can escape? Today, none of you will leave here alive." With that, he threw the black energy ball in his hand at us. The energy ball streaked across the sky like a shooting star, whistling as it rapidly closed in on us. I felt the heat behind me growing stronger and stronger, and secretly prayed that we would reach the cave in time. Finally, we dashed into the cave. Just as we entered, the black energy ball exploded outside, sending a huge shockwave that made the cave shake and rocks fall. I held Elena close to me and used my body to protect her from the falling debris. After a while, the sound of the explosion gradually subsided, and the cave was filled with a pungent smoke. I coughed a few times and let Elena go. "Are you okay?" I asked with concern. Elena nodded, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you. If not for you, She didn't finish her sentence, as she was interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from outside the cave. We knew that the evil spirit sorcerer had already caught up with us. "Hiding here is useless. You won't be able to escape today." The evil spirit sorcerer's voice echoed in the cave, sounding particularly eerie. I looked at Elena and said firmly, "No matter what, we have to face it together. As long as we work together, we will definitely find his weak point." Elena took a deep breath and nodded. We hid in the corner of the cave and waited quietly for the evil spirit wizard to arrive. As the sound of footsteps grew closer, my heartbeat quickened. I held a stone tightly in my hand, ready to deal him a fatal blow at the critical moment. Finally, the figure of the evil spirit wizard appeared at the cave entrance. His eyes flashed with an evil light in the darkness, and he quickly discovered our location. "Humph, see where you can hide," he said, walking towards us step by step. Elena and I looked at each other and rushed out of the corner at the same time, pouncing on the evil spirit sorcerer. The evil spirit sorcerer obviously did not expect us to attack, and he was slightly stunned, but he quickly reacted, flinging his hands and sending a powerful force that bounced us off. Elena and I fell to the ground, and we felt a sharp pain in our bodies. But we did not give up, and we got up again and continued to charge at him. In the fierce battle, we kept looking for his weak points, while the evil spirit sorcerer also kept launching attacks, trying to completely eliminate us. The battle was fierce, and we didn't know how much longer we could hold out. But we had only one belief in our hearts. No matter what, we mustn't give up. We must defeat the evil sorcerer and return to a peaceful life. The evil sorcerer was also enraged by our resistance, and his attacks became even more frantic. The whole cave shook under his power. Our fate was uncertain in this fierce conflict. Inside the cave, dust was flying and rocks were falling from the ceiling. Elena and I were on the defensive against the evil spirit's mad attacks. Every time we were knocked away by his power and our bodies hit the hard cave walls, it sent sharp pain through our bodies, but we gritted our teeth and clenched our teeth, our eyes locked on the evil spirit, trying to find a weakness in his attacks. The evil spirit wizard's face was full of a hideous smile, as if he was enjoying our struggle under his power. Just the two of you, and you dare to contend with me? You are simply overestimating your own abilities. Today, this is where you will be buried. As he roared, he waved his hands and cast even more powerful dark magic. Black magic beams of light shot at us like lightning. Elena and I dodged left and right, but we were inevitably grazed, leaving behind shocking wounds. Elena's strength was gradually running out, her movements became sluggish, and a hint of despair could be seen in her eyes. I was anxious, but there was nothing I could do. I could only stand in front of her more desperately, taking the attacks of the evil spirit sorcerer. Just as we were about to be swallowed up by darkness, Elena suddenly let out a cry of surprise. I looked in the direction she was looking, and saw that behind the evil spirit sorcerer, in the depths of the originally dark cave, there was a faint glimmer of light. The light was weak but firm, as if it were a glimmer of hope in the darkness. The evil spirit sorcerer also noticed the abnormality, and he turned his head sharply, a flash of panic in his eyes. As the evil spirit wizard was distracted, I seized the opportunity and charged at him with all my strength. I raised the stone in my hand high and brought it down with all my strength on his head. The evil spirit wizard reacted extremely quickly sidestepping to avoid it, and my stone only grazed his shoulder, leaving a scratch on his black robe. The evil spirit sorcerer was furious. He turned around, his eyes burning with rage. "You damned ant! How dare you hurt me?" He clenched his fists, and the dark energy around his body surged wildly. A powerful suction force formed in the cave, sucking the surrounding stones and dust towards him. I was pulled by this suction force, and my body involuntarily moved closer to the evil spirit sorcerer. I struggled desperately to get away from this force, but to no avail. Elena saw this, and a flash of determination passed through her eyes. She clutched the black crystal ball in her hand and, regardless of her own safety, charged towards the evil spirit sorcerer. "No, Elena, don't!" I shouted, my heart filled with fear. I was afraid of losing her, afraid that all our efforts would come to nothing. Elena ignored my cries. Her eyes were firm and determined as she raised the crystal ball high in the air and muttered a spell. Suddenly, the crystal ball emitted a dazzling light, a light as hot as the sun that illuminated the entire cave. The evil spirit sorcerer was blinded by the light and let out a painful shriek. He covered his eyes with his hands and his body began to tremble violently. The powerful suction force disappeared at the same time, and I took the opportunity to break free and ran towards Elena. "Ileana, are you okay?" I asked anxiously. Ileana's face was pale as paper, and her clothes were soaked with sweat, but a trace of relief shone in her eyes. "I'm fine. It seems that the power in this crystal ball has been awakened," she said weakly. Just then, the evil spirit wizard suddenly let out a roar. Black mist once again billowed around his body, and his hair danced wildly, as if trying to engulf the entire cave. "Do you think you can defeat me like this? How naive!" His voice was full of anger and unwillingness. The evil spirit sorcerer waved his hands, and the black mist quickly condensed into a huge scythe, slashing towards us. Elena and I embraced each other tightly, our hearts filled with despair. Just as the scythe was about to cut us, the ray of light deep in the cave suddenly became even stronger. A white light pillar shot out from the depths of the cave and directly hit the scythe in the evil spirit sorcerer's hand. The scythe instantly shattered under the impact of the light pillar, turning into countless black fragments scattered all over the ground. The evil spirit sorcerer let out a scream. His body was hit by the light pillar and he was knocked flying, crashing heavily against the cave wall. He struggled to stand up, but was unable to do so. His body began to become illusory, as if it would disappear at any moment. What's going on? The evil sorcerer's voice was full of fear and doubt. A hint of reluctance could be seen in his eyes. He never expected that just as he was about to win, such a turn of events would occur. Elena and I were also stunned by the scene before us. We stared blankly at the evil sorcerer, our hearts full of doubts. Just then, a voice came from the depths of the cave, gentle yet full of power. "Evil spirit wizard, your evil ways will end here. The guardian power of this forest will not allow such an evil existence." As the voice sounded, a figure slowly walked from the depths of the cave. It was an old man dressed in a long white robe. His hair and beard were white, and his eyes revealed a kind of serenity and wisdom. He was holding a staff in his hand, and the top of the staff was emitting a soft light. "You are?" I asked in surprise. The old man smiled and nodded. "I am the guardian of these forests and have been watching your battle from afar. When I felt the power of the crystal ball awaken, I knew it was time to intervene." The evil spirit sorcerer looked at the old man with fear and anger in his eyes. You dare to interfere in my affairs. I will not let you go." His voice was full of threats, but his body was dissolving. The old man shook his head. "Evil spirit sorcerer, you have lost yourself and let darkness consume your mind. Today you must accept your punishment." With that, the old man raised his staff and muttered a spell. A ray of light shot out of the staff and enveloped the evil spirit sorcerer. The evil spirit sorcerer let out a scream, and his body gradually dissipated in the light, eventually disappearing without a trace. Calm returned to the cave. Elena and I looked at each other, our eyes filled with gratitude and joy. We had finally defeated the evil spirit sorcerer and rid ourselves of his threat. "Thank you, Senior," Elena and I said at the same time. The old man smiled and nodded. "You don't have to thank me. This is your own merit. As long as your hearts are filled with righteousness and hope, there is no difficulty that cannot be overcome." With that, the old man's figure gradually disappeared, and only Elena and I were left in the cave. We walked out of the cave and looked at the forest outside, which had returned to its former tranquility. We were filled with emotion. This battle had brought us countless trials and suffering, but it had also strengthened our faith in each other. We held hands as we walked towards home. The road ahead may still be full of challenges, but we believe that as long as we are together, nothing can stop us from pursuing happiness. However, we also know that although the dark magic in Alana has been suppressed for now, it has not been completely eliminated. We still need to find a permanent solution, and this will be our new challenge. Elena and I walked hand in hand out of the forest, which had once been full of danger and fear. The sun's warm rays fell on us, and although this should have been a pleasant feeling, our mood remained heavy. Although Elena had temporarily escaped the threat of the evil sorcerer, the remaining dark magic in her was like a time bomb, ready to drag us back into the abyss at any time. Elena's body grew weaker and weaker, and every step seemed incredibly difficult. Her face was pale as paper, her lips had no blood in them, and her eyes, which had once been bright, had lost their former radiance and were dull and lifeless. Her long hair was no longer as black and beautiful as before, but was dry and coarse, and occasionally a few strands would fall out. As I looked at her, I felt a mixture of pain and self-blame. If only I had noticed her abnormalities earlier, she might not have come to this. When I returned home, I carefully helped Elena lie down on the bed. She lay quietly on the bed, her eyes closed, breathing weakly. I sat by the bed, holding her hand tightly, not daring to let go for a moment, as if I let go, she would leave me. "Elena, you must hang on. We will definitely find a way to completely remove the dark magic from your body," I said softly, as if I were comforting her, and as if I were cheering myself on. In the days that followed, I began asking around for ways to remove the dark magic. I went to every corner of Wind Whisper Town and asked everyone I could think of, but all I got in return were shakes of the head and sighs. Some said that the dark magic was too powerful and would be difficult to remove once it had taken hold. Others said that it was a taboo that could never be undone. But I did not give up. I firmly believed that there must be a way to save Elena. One day, while drinking in the tavern in town, I heard a few adventurers talking about a mysterious place, the Misty Swamp. It was said that all kinds of mysterious powers and ancient magic were hidden there, and perhaps a way to remove the dark magic could be found there. I was overjoyed, as if I had seen a glimmer of hope. After returning home, I told Elena this news. Elena opened her eyes slightly, a glimmer of light flashing in her eyes, but it quickly faded. "It must be very dangerous there, and you must not risk your life for me," she said weakly. I took her hand and said firmly, "For you, I am willing to go, no matter how dangerous it is. Rest well, and when I return, I will definitely find a way to cure you." The next morning, I packed my bags and prepared to set off on a journey to find salvation. Elena struggled to sit up in bed, her eyes full of worry and reluctance. "You must be careful and come back soon," she said, her voice shaking a little. I walked over to her and gave her a gentle hug. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." I left Wind Whisper Town and headed towards Misty Swamp. Along the way, I encountered all kinds of difficulties and dangers. In the dense forest, ferocious beasts hid, occasionally darting out of the shadows to attack me. On the precipitous mountain peaks, the wind howled, threatening to blow me off the cliffs at any moment. But none of this made me back down. Yelena's frail figure was always in the back of my mind, inspiring me to keep going. After several days and nights of arduous trekking, I finally reached the edge of the Misty Swamp. The swamp was shrouded in a thick layer of mist, making it impossible to see what was inside. I took a deep breath and gathered my courage before stepping into this mysterious area. As soon as I entered, I felt a cold, damp breath on my face, which made me shiver involuntarily. The ground was covered with thick sludge, and every step was very difficult. My feet were soon covered in sludge. Strange sounds could be heard from time to time, like the growl of some kind of creature, or the wind whistling in my ears. I carefully made my way through the swamp. Suddenly, I saw an object not far ahead that was flickering with a weak light. I thought to myself, could this be what I'm looking for? I quickened my pace towards the object, but when I got closer, I realized it was just an ordinary glowing stone, and I couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. Just as I was about to continue walking, I suddenly felt a powerful force coming from behind me. I turned around sharply and saw a huge monster rushing out of the mist. It was 2 stories tall, with huge claws and sharp teeth, and its eyes gleamed green with aggression. I was shocked, and quickly drew my weapon to prepare for battle. The monster roared and pounced at me, so I sidestepped and swung my weapon at it. But the monster's body was incredibly hard, and my attack seemed to have no effect. With a swipe of its claws, I was knocked flying and fell heavily to the ground. I struggled to get up, and I felt intense pain all over my body. I knew that if I didn't find a way to deal with this monster soon, I might die here today. Just as I felt despair, I suddenly remembered the scene when Elena awakened the power of the crystal ball during the battle with the evil spirit sorcerer in the forest. I had a sudden idea. Maybe I could also find a way to stimulate my own power. I closed my eyes and concentrated, recalling the moments I had spent with Elena. Those happy memories filled my heart with strength. I opened my eyes again, and the weapon in my hand glowed faintly. I swung the weapon and charged at the monster. This time, my attack seemed to have an effect, and the monster let out a roar and began to stagger. After a fierce battle, I finally defeated the monster. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. But I didn't have time to rest. I knew that Ileana was still waiting for me to come back and save her. I continued to search the swamp, and finally, in a hidden cave, I found an ancient book. I opened the book carefully. Although I couldn't read some of the words, I could feel the powerful energy contained within. I put the book away and left the misty swamp. After returning to Windward Town, I couldn't wait to go home and show the book to Ileana. A glimmer of hope flashed in Elena's eyes as we began to study the ancient book together. Although the process was difficult, we did not give up. We believed that as long as we persevered, we would definitely find a way to remove the dark magic from her body and complete this difficult redemption. And in the process, we will also cherish each other more and face all future challenges together. Elena and I eagerly opened the ancient book we had brought back from the misty swamp, but reality hit us like a ton of bricks. The words in the book were obscure and difficult to understand, like an ancient language that had long been lost. Every character seemed to be playing hide and seek with us, and no matter how hard we tried, we could hardly make sense of the meaning. Elena's body was still weak, but she forced herself to hold on, leaning against the bed, her eyes fixed on the pages as she tried to find a clue in the squiggly symbols. Her fingers gently stroked the paper as she muttered to herself, as if she were having a conversation with the words in the book. Maybe the key to unlocking the dark magic in me is hidden within. We mustn't give up. Her voice was weak, but it was full of determination. In the following days, we spent almost all of our time studying the ancient book. I searched everywhere for someone who might know the language. I visited scholars from Windward Town, passing travelers, and even those seemingly mysterious fortune-tellers. But the answers I got were all shakes of the head. No one could read the words, and no one could provide us with any useful help. Elena's condition worsened day by day. She grew increasingly thin. Her already pale complexion became even more bloodless, and her breathing became rapid and weak. Watching her in pain, I was desperate but unable to do anything. Sometimes, she would be tormented by dark magic in her sleep and let out painful moans. I could only hold her hand tightly and whisper comfort in her ear, telling her that everything would be fine. Just when we were feeling desperate, by chance I met a wandering wise man in town. He was tall and thin, wearing a tattered but clean robe, and his face had a peaceful and profound expression. His eyes revealed a wisdom that seemed to see through everything in the world. I felt like I had grabbed a lifeline and immediately ran up to him, telling him about Elena's ordeal and the ancient book we had in our hands. The wise man listened quietly without interrupting me. When I had finished, he nodded slightly and said, "Maybe I can help you look at that book." His voice was low and gentle, and it gave a sense of inexplicable peace. I was so excited that I could hardly speak, and hurriedly took the wise man back to our home. Elena's eyes flashed with a glimmer of hope when she saw the wise man. The wise man sat down by the bed and gently took the ancient book from us. His eyes were immediately drawn to the words in the book. His fingers slowly moved across the pages, muttering something under his breath, and his expression became increasingly serious. Time passed by minute, and the room was so quiet that you could only hear Elena's faint breathing and the sound of the wise man turning the pages. Elena and I nervously watched the wise man, afraid to make a sound for fear of disturbing him. Finally, the wise man looked up, and a trace of relief could be seen in his eyes. "This book contains an ancient purification spell that may be able to remove the dark magic from you," the wise man said. Elena and I looked at each other, our eyes filled with surprise and excitement. "Really? So what should we do?" Couldn't wait to ask. The wise man nodded with a smile. "This purification magic requires 3 special ingredients: the petals of the moonlight flower, the sap of the star-dust grass, and the power of a pure heart. The moonlight flower only blooms on the night of the full moon and grows on cliffs. The star-dust grass is hidden in the mysterious star-dust cave, which is full of danger. And the power of a pure heart requires the purity of your heart and unwavering faith." Hearing the wise man's words, I did not hesitate for a moment. No matter how difficult it is, I am willing to find these ingredients. Elena looked at me with gratitude and love in her eyes. "Thank you, my dear. You have sacrificed so much for me." The next day, I set out on a journey to find the moonlight flower. I came to the cliff that the wise man had mentioned. This cliff towered high into the sky, and the steep mountain wall was covered with thorns and gravel. I climbed carefully, every step fraught with danger. At night, the moonlight shone on the cliff, and I finally saw the moonlight flower emitting a soft glow. I reached out excitedly to pick it, but just then, a huge bird flew out of the cave next to me, flapping its wings and sending up a gust of wind that almost blew me off the cliff. I clung to the vines on the mountain wall, my heart filled with fear, but the thought of Elena gave me courage. I engaged in a fierce battle with the bird, and finally managed to drive it away and pluck the petals of the moonlight flower. Next, I went to the Stardust Cave. The cave was filled with a mysterious glow, and the ground was covered with traps and mechanisms. I moved cautiously, avoiding all kinds of dangers. Deep in the cave, I finally found the Stardust Herb. I collected the Stardust Herb's sap in the bottle I had brought with me, but just as I was about to leave, a group of fierce monsters appeared. I brandished the weapon in my hands and fought the monsters to the death. My body was exhausted, but I had only one belief in my heart, and that was that I must get these ingredients to save Elena. After a hard battle, I finally defeated the monsters and successfully left the Stardust Cave. Back home, I handed the petals of the moonlight flower and the sap of the Stardust Herb to the Wise One. The Wise One nodded. "Now, it's up to your pure hearts." Elena and I held hands tightly, closed our eyes, concentrated, and thought of our fond memories and hopes for the future. Suddenly, a warm power rose from our hearts and merged with the two ingredients. Seeing this, the wise man smiled and began to cast the purification spell. A radiance enveloped Elena, and her body began to tremble, her face showing signs of pain. But she clenched her teeth and didn't make a sound. As the magic was cast, the dark magic in Elena's body gradually dispersed, and her face began to regain its rosy complexion. Finally, the magic ended, and Elena slowly opened her eyes once again full of radiance. "I feel much better. Thank you, dear," she said, her voice full of joy and gratitude. We knew that this was just the beginning, and Elena's body still needed time to recover, but we finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. In the days to come, we will face more challenges together and cherish this hard-won happiness. Elena's body, under the effect of the purification magic, successfully dispelled the dark magic. Her once pale face gradually regained its former rosy complexion, and her eyes once again radiated with brightness, which finally set my heart at ease. However, her body had after all suffered from the dark magic for a long time and was very weak, and it would take a long time of recuperation to completely recover. After the wise man had completed the purification spell, he bid us farewell. His figure faded away in the setting sun, leaving only Elena and me at home together. From then on, I devoted myself to taking care of Elena's daily life. Every morning, I would get up early to prepare a nutritious breakfast for her. I would go to the market to select the freshest ingredients and cook them with care, hoping to make her eat more and regain her strength as soon as possible. Elena looks at my busy figure with tenderness and guilt in her eyes. "My dear, you have worked hard during this time. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have experienced so many dangers," she says softly, with a hint of a sob in her voice. I walk over to her, gently take her hand and smile. "Silly, we are husband and wife. No matter what happens, I am willing to do anything for you. As long as you get better, it will be worth it no matter what I do." With my careful care, Elena's health gradually improved. She was able to take long walks in the courtyard and breathe in the fresh air. Watching her light figure among the flowers, I felt full of happiness, as if I were seeing the way we were when we first got married. However, this peaceful life did not last long. One day, while Elena was sunbathing in the courtyard, she suddenly felt dizzy and her body started to shake uncontrollably. I rushed over to her and held her up, filled with worry. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well again?" I asked anxiously. Elena forced a smile and said, "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired from walking for so long." But I knew that her body had not yet fully recovered and that she needed to be taken care of more carefully. In order to help Elena recover, I decided to take her to a spa resort on the outskirts of town. The hot spring water there is said to have miraculous healing properties that nourish the body and boost the immune system. We packed our bags and set off for the spa. Elena was in a particularly good mood the whole way, her face beaming as she looked out the window at the scenery. "I haven't felt this relaxed in a long time. It feels so good," she said with emotion. After arriving at the hot spring, we found a comfortable inn to stay at. The next morning, I accompanied Elena to the hot spring pool. The hot spring pool was steaming, with a light mist floating on the surface, like a fairyland. Elena slowly walked into the hot spring pool. The warm spring water enveloped her body. She closed her eyes and her face showed an expression of enjoyment. "It feels so good. It feels like every cell in my body has been awakened," she said softly. During the days of spa therapy, Yelena's body got better and better. We would take walks by the hot springs and admire the beautiful scenery around us. We would sit in the courtyard at night, looking up at the stars and talk about our thoughts. Yelena's smile also grew more and more, and she rediscovered the joy of life. After a period of spa therapy, Yelena's body finally recovered completely. Her hair became black and shiny again, and her figure regained its former charm. We returned to Wind Whisperer Town, and the people in the town congratulated us when they saw that Yelena had recovered her health. After returning home, Yelena decided to redecorate our room to make it full of warmth. She went to the market to choose beautiful fabrics and sewed new curtains and bed sheets for us by hand. Watching her serious face, I was filled with emotion. "In the future, our lives will definitely get better and better," she said firmly. As time passed, our lives gradually returned to normal. Elena and I ran our small business together, living a simple but happy life. We would go to the fields together to work, to feel the beauty of nature. In our spare time, we would sit in the courtyard drinking tea and chatting, reminiscing about the bits and pieces of our past. Every nightfall, we would hold hands and take a walk in the streets of the town. The moonlight shone on us, casting long shadows. Elena leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you, my dear. You have given me back my life and made me understand the true meaning of happiness." I held her hand tightly and said, "No, I should thank you. You have made my life complete. No matter what happens in the future, we will face it together." Our story spread throughout Wind Whisper Town and became a well-known anecdote. We also know that this experience has made us cherish each other more and understand the preciousness of love and the beauty of life even more. We will always guard this hard-won happiness and walk hand in hand through every spring, summer, autumn, and winter in the future.